Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Greg Richardson. I'm with Cal State San Bernardino. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation on today. I'm excited that you're here. I'm going to share my screen and then get right into the content of the material on today. I'm going to speak to you today on the portrayals of Black men and boys in media. Narratives intended to inhibit positive societal contributions. My objectives, basically, I want to make sure that you have the facts and that you are able to analyze them so that you can have a good informed decision. Secondly, there are several things related to racial identities associated with Black males. I want to indicate to you that some of these things are not the way they should be, but there is no way to really attribute how Black men act, think, or behave because people are individuals and we have to know the individual. Thirdly, I want to clarify the role of teachers in positive portrayals. Teachers touch every profession. I also want to solicit advocacy in the advancement of systemic racism. Institutional racism, systemic racism needs to be eradicated. My non-presentation objectives, this is tribute blame. That's not the intent here. I don't want to trigger defense mechanisms. I don't want to discount collaborative work of others. What I would like to do, though, is give you a couple of definitions that we're going to look at a little bit later and that you would consider as you think about the information I share with you. When we talk about systemic racism, we're talking about those policies and practices that exist that actually maintain racist standards. This is something that Kwame Ture actually came up with a number of years ago. Some of you might know him as Stokely Carmichael. Then also, there's racial battle fatigue. This is where psychological stresses are responses that are triggered by certain events and sayings. Many African American young men experience frustration, shock, disappointment, anger, anxiety, helplessness, and sometimes disappointment because of the way things exist. Questions I want you to think about: why should teachers be concerned about negative ideologies? When do teachers inadvertently use media to construct negative images of Black males? What can teachers do about the literature in their classrooms and on their campuses? How can teachers influence positive external media portrayals of Blacks? Well, the problem: negative portrayals in media. How does media indicate negative portrayals of Black men and boys? I'm going to start with the historical narrative first. Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution indicates that Black Americans were considered 3/5 of a person. Of course, we know that's not true. You can't have 3/5 of a person. But why did that exist? Well, it all had to do with the House of Representatives, and taxation. And of course, the less people, the less taxes that were paid. Over the years, there were several labels that were attributed to Black people, African Americans: colored, Negro, Black, African American. The last two actually are sort of interchangeable. Black Americans, African Americans, Blacks. That's some of the acceptable terms today among the African American population. I'm going to look at the African American movement for the last few years, actually since 1870. But before I do that, I want to mention something about President Abraham Lincoln. President Abraham Lincoln had proposed a constitutional amendment, three of them to be specifically. The third one was that Congress was to authorize to provide colonization of free Blacks outside of the United States of America. Well, in 1870, after the emancipation, then we found out that Reconstruction began to take place. America was going through a number of changes, economically, ethnically wise, and just a number of changes taking place. It was after that time that Marcus Garvey got on this big push to take Black people out of the Americas. And that movement actually had its height in 1920. During 1920, there was Black nationalism. This is when Blacks began to realize that they were somebody and they wanted to be recognized as being someone. It was a Harlem Renaissance that took place, for instance. The intellectual capacity of Black people was heightened. Their social ability was moving. Their artistic nature was moving. By the way, when slaves were brought here to the Americas, they were not just people that had physical strength to do things, but these were artisans that had came here to the United States with certain skills that actually were brought here for that purpose. For instance, some of you have gone to IKEA and you notice that you can assemble things at IKEA by just basically taking a dowel or some type of screw that twists things. Well, there were actually nails that were not metal nails, but they were actually dowels that were constructed so they can interlock wooden pieces together. This is one of the skills of certain African tribes in certain countries of Africa that they had developed, but that skill was brought to the America where you actually construct a wooden building without metal nails. And just as a side note, in 1968, the singer James Brown came up with a song, "I'm Black and I'm Proud," and that started a big movement among the African Americans. After that, things began to evolve, and Blacks been basically looking for equality and equity in the system that has not afforded them those particular rights. We get to 2020. We have Black Lives Matter. I know you've heard about Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, Walter Scott, and there are many others. But look at the fact, suppose these are actually your cousins, your relatives. How would you feel if your lives were taken from them because of the way the system currently is? Well, you wouldn't feel too good about that. There have been some stolen achievements of African Americans. And when my grandmother, I used to visit her. Sometimes she would listen to the radio. She loved the radio, listened to the radio a number of years before I even came along. One of her favorite shows was The Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger. Well, she would listen to The Lone Ranger. And as she listened to The Lone Ranger, I got involved in it also. The Lone Ranger was actually even a television show that ran for several years. And there's been several movies about the Lone Ranger. Interesting, though, that the Lone Ranger was not white. No, that's a stolen achievement that actually exists. The real Lone Ranger's name is Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves is a slave who had gone into the war with his master, and they had a disagreement, a big fight, and Bass Reeves ran for his life. He ran to the Oklahoma territories where a lot of Indians, a lot of bandits and so forth lived, and he actually became a friend of the Indians and spoke many Indian languages. He went back to Arkansas and actually became a sheriff. And he is known for actually being a mighty bounty hunter. He had over 300 arrests. He, similar to the Lone Ranger, no, the Lone Ranger was as a similitude after him. For instance, the Lone Ranger wore a mask. Bass Reeves did not wear a mask. Bass Reeves was known, though, for infiltrating the enemy's camp. He would act like a bandit. He would act like a drunk. He would act like dress up like a woman. He would act even like a criminal himself. And he would get amongst the people that he wanted to get, particularly one or two individuals. And that's how he would actually get in. There was no silver bullet. But Bass Reeves did have silver dollars that he gave to people as his calling card. Yes, he rode a white horse. What about Tonto? Well, Tonto was the Indian that accompanied Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves had not, it wasn't Tonto, but on the movie it was Tonto. But Bass Reeves had an Indian buddy that accompanied him on many of his exploitations they actually did as he went out and got these criminals. So the real Bass Reeves is actually a Black man. The movie, the sitcom, the show that was on television, Living Single, features 6 young people and how they live together and working together. Interesting enough, the same things that were done on Living Singles were done on Friends. Both shows are very popular and very good, but Friends started 1 year after Living Single. Living Single ran 5 years and Friends ran for several years also. Interesting thing, the networks began to put Friends on the same night at the same time that Living Single was on. So people had to make a distinction as to which show they're going to watch. But eventually the blacks watched Living Single only, and many of the whites watched Friends only. But here are a couple of scenarios to show you how Friends copied Living Single, a black show. Okay, there were two relatives living together in Living Single, and so they were in Friends also. Friends copied. Two of the people that were living together were in college. And Friends, two people that lived together were in college. Friends just copied. Even in Living Single, there were two roommates that actually got together, and the woman ended up getting pregnant. Well, what happened in Friends? The same thing. Those were actually portrayals of blacks that had powerful things that took place in their life, but they did not get the credit. I'm going to play a portion of a song for you right now, and then I'll speak to it in just a moment. Well, you're familiar with that. That's The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Why did I play that? I played that because The Lion Sleeps Tonight is another stolen achievement. It was actually written in 1939 and recorded by a man by the name of, oh my goodness, his last name was Lindy, Solomon. Solomon, and adopted last name was Lindy. He recorded it down in South Africa, but it didn't, it was big and popular back then, but what happened was he got no credit, no royalties for singing that song. What had taken place was in the 50s and 60s, the matter of fact, the group I just featured just then with the Tokens, they sang The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Then it was also actually sang by a group in the UK in the 80s. In the 21st century, there were several movies that featured this song. Disney made millions of dollars using that song in their movies. Well, the family never got credit. They actually took Disney to court, and fighting a great big old giant, they did not win. But that was a stolen achievement that actually taken place. Speaking of Disney, in the world, we have media conglomerates. Now, keep in mind, I'm showing you negative portrayals of Black men and boys in media. And then we're going to talk about why this exists and what you as teachers can actually do about it. Because the future of teacher education has a role in preparing teachers to prepare students to enter the world and make contributions to society. Yes, Black men and boys as well. Okay, there are 6 media conglomerates that they basically own a lot of things in the world. Disney is not number 1, they're actually number 2, but I'm going to talk about Disney first. Disney actually, Bob Iger, his salary a year is $44.9 million. Now, if his salary is $44.9 million, you can imagine how much money Disney is actually making. Interesting. Well, Disney has things that they are doing that would support and help and entertain children and even adults. I'm sure you're familiar with the ABC family, Marvel, ESPN, and there are others. But more than them are the National Amusement. National Amusement, you know them as Viscom, Simon & Schuster. They're big in gaming, on websites. Summer Redstone, the owner, he's worth $4.6 billion. Wow, interesting. Then thirdly, there's Time Warner, Jeff Bewkes. His salary is $32.5 million. TVs and movies are their big thing. Comcast, international service provider. The president, Brian Roberts, $40.8 million. And why am I saying all this? Because, see, Blacks have been exploited over the years, and unfortunately, Black men and boys are not getting the due credit that they deserve. Many of the things that we have done have been either attributed to someone else, or we have not gotten credit at all. But even worse is the negative portrayals that the media puts out there indicates that we're incapable, incompetent of doing things at precision and expertise, when that's not true. We're capable of doing things in a number of different areas. And that's because I'm part of that group also. I'm not going to read the whole list, but you see the list down here, signing News Corp and so forth. But let me deviate for a moment. So what's my perspective on this? Right now, I have a picture on here I want to show you. And just before I explain to you what's going on with this picture that I took out of a magazine, I'm going to tell you how I first began to realize that there were messages in media's print representations, not just in the movies. For instance, in the movies, you notice that many times the African American male was the first to die in the action movies. Why? Just recently, I saw the news about uh, President Trump and his medical condition. Who shared the news? They found a black man to share the negative news so that people get locked in their mind anything negatively associated with black males. Interesting. It should not be like that. Well, a number of years ago, I bought my children a set of encyclopedias, Encyclopedia Britannica. And one day I was just thumbing through the book and I noticed that there was a picture of a young boy in the book and he was looking like he was looking at something. So I have a keen eye. So I began to get a ruler. I took a ruler and I put the ruler from where he was gazing straight up in the book. And lo and behold, where he was gazing was a derogatory statement that was written right there in the book, as well as a caption underneath the picture. I'm going, man, this is crazy. So I began looking at things. Let me analyze this picture for you here. In this picture, we see a young man. Obviously, there's hope, there's opportunity with the armed services. The caption says, in the armed forces are in a lot more than stripes. Well, I'll get back to that in a moment. So in the picture, you see a young lady sitting at the table in the library, and she's reading. Okay, great. But way in the back is an African-American young man. He's reading out of a book. But he's not even in the library completely because he's reading from the light that comes from the sun that's coming through the window. And he's the smallest image in the picture. And just above him, the caption, in the armed forces, I learned a lot more than stripes. Well, can you think of any time that black men have been associated with stripes? Yes, it was called the beatings that they experienced during slavery. These are little things that people get in their mind, and sometimes they observe that they don't observe. And I say, it might be a little far-fetched, but let me take you to another one. This picture here, Daydreaming 101, is a picture taken out of another magazine. And it basically shows that there's some college graduates, they completed their curriculum responsibilities and their requirements are met, and they were in their regalia and so forth, and they're actually going through the door of success. But as they go through the door of success, there's actually a slide there where they're sliding down. But let me draw your attention to the top part of the picture. There's a desk right there in the cloud, and the man is actually pointing to the chair. So this seat belongs to you. On the desk, there's a sign that says you. They have a big smile on their face. Their eyes are pointed towards the people come to the door, even though they're closed, like in gratitude and appreciation. And there's a white man looking directly at them. But right behind him is a black woman. But look, in front of the white man coming through the door, there's a white woman, and she's actually going down the chute. Interesting. Where are they going? Oh, below her is an African-American young man, and his regalia is falling off. He has his diploma in his hand, but look, he's wearing tennis shoes. Interesting, tennis shoes. And what's he going to do? Well, he looks like he's going down into hell itself. You see the guy there with a lot of paper and so forth, and the people that are down there got this nasty attitude on their face, and it's like, you're going to work real hard, and so it's like, yeah, you got your degree, but you're going to really, really work hard. You're not going to have it easy like those that are sitting at the desk. You're not going to make the decisions. You're not going to sign your name multiple times indicating how much money you make. None of that's take place. Well, that's a negative portrayal of black men. This one here is a little bit more pronounced, and I'm going to share this with you. And now I want to give you, this is from a magazine cover, okay, Writer's Craft, and on here, idea to expression. You have three pictures. Good looking people, two good looking ladies and a good looking guy down there. The red lines are actually mine. I wrote that actually on the magazine because I want you to see that. Okay. Now let me interpret for you. First of all, let's look at the picture of the young lady and the young man at the bottom, African American young people. You notice the picture of the African young man is smaller than the picture of the African American young lady. Interesting. Why is it smaller? Because that's the position that a lot of people want to see the African American man, not as the head of a household, not as one that can take care of the woman. He's bigger, but he's a little small one. He needs a mama to take care of him. He needs a mother to take care of him. But look, right below his picture, I have an underlined the word noise. Interesting. How is that a coincidence that noise is right by his picture? No, because sometimes society, media portrayals of black men is that they are noisy, they're loud, they're buffoons, they're ignorant, they know nothing, they cause a lot of problems, they're disruptive. And that's not true. Yes, it happens with some African Americans. Yes, it happens with some Asian Americans. Yes, it happens with some Mexican Americans. Yes, it happens with some white Americans, but not with all Black Americans. But that's what media wants you to think. Above the young man's picture, right next to the African American young lady, is the words woman kitchen. Why are that strategically the words right next to her? Is it insinuating that she should be in the kitchen? Aunt your mama? No, that's not what really exists, but that's what the media wants people to think, that this is the role that African American women should have. Okay, but let's look at the good looking young lady at the top there. Okay, her picture is much larger than that of the African Americans at the bottom. Interesting. And right next to the right of her picture is a bird representative of an eagle, like this is America. Well, what does it say in America? Well, the red line above the lady's picture says, uh, that unites us all. Huh, interesting. This is what unites the majority culture? Is this the message that's being portrayed? Yes, it is. And it's an incorrect, inappropriate message that needs to be changed. This United States of America is not a melting pot. We are a salad bowl. Every ethnic culture brings something to the bowl that enhances the outcome for the total people. We all are major contributors. The question that I presented to you earlier, why should teachers be concerned about negative ideologies conveyed about Black men and boys? Well, namely because we need to change the image. We need to change people's thoughts and ideas about who Black American boys are and what they're capable of doing. We need to consider them a number of different things. I'm going to share how do you do about change, and I'm going to be closing soon. This was adopted from Sean Hopper, one of his articles in 2016, Actions to Reduce Negative Portrayals. Well, we need to recognize our personal implicit biases and remediate racial illiteracy. We have to understand that certain things are attributed to certain groups, not to stereotype them, but we need to understand how people operate. Case in example, I taught in middle school. It took me a while to understand that when I was basically disciplining a young Hispanic young man, I did not have eye contact when I wanted eye contact. But according to his culture, respectfully, he was not to give eye contact to someone that was in authority over him because it was a form of disrespect. Something I had to learn. Okay, there are many more things associated with other different ethnic cultures and so forth. Everyone has personal implicit biases. I had to overcome some myself. But once we get over that, then we are in a position that we can help people. Another action to reduce negative portrayals: do not be surprised when a Black male exceeds academically. The three raw R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. I love the movie Finding Forrester. In the movie Find Forrester, this young man happens to meet somebody that is a prolific writer. He does not know that this is the well-known writer named Forrester. And so the young man writes a paper and asks him if he would critique it, and he critiques it, and he bleeds all over. They call it bleeding, blood, red. Okay, but anyway, long story short, the young man learns how to write. And because Forrester is his mentor, his writing is very similar to Forrester's. Well, his instructor at the university didn't think that the young man, because he's Black, could write well. And so the young man had agreed that he would never divulge who Forrester was or where he learned to write, so that he can keep the identity of Forrester secret. Well, his professor was one that was not as sharp as Forrester and just happened to be teaching. And he actually began to chide and discipline the young man. But to the surprise, everyone, Forrester shows up. The professor recognizes him, and the professor is told by Forrester that the young man wrote that piece all by himself. But at that time, the professor realized that he had attributed the inability to Forrester incorrectly. Another stereotype threat that exists is that people have to realize that sometimes just because somebody's Black doesn't mean they can't learn. Just because someone, and young people have to face with this. Just this week, one of my students in the essay he had written shared some stories about African-American young men who had come to him and said, you know, it no sense me doing good at school because even when I get out, I won't be able to find a job. Another one said, well, you know, since I'm in school, it really doesn't do any good because when I get out, the system's going to do something to me to put me in prison. These are the thoughts that are running through people's minds, stereotype threats. Fourthly, to reduce negative portrayals, integrate diverse cultures with peoples into the curriculum. We can find people that do things that are other ethnicities. For instance, I am an accomplished equestrian. You would never think that someone raised in the intercity could ride as well as I do, but I do. Well, just looking at me, you would never know that. So I want to encourage you. We can take care of racial tensions when they pop up in the classroom. And the way we do that is simply to address the moment at the time. Sometimes we are not able to um, know exactly what to say or how to say it. But you know what? It's a teachable moment for you and the student. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you give your students opportunity to get in the discussion. We are facilitators. We don't know everything, and we don't spoon feed adults like we do children in the K-12 system. They come to the table with a wealth of knowledge, and we tap into that and teach them the things that we want them to learn. But we have to realize that people come in with different spans of knowledge they're willing to share. I am so glad that you're able to join me today in my presentation. I have several questions I would like to ask of you, but more importantly, questions you might have that you want to ask of me. This is an opportunity for us to do that. So please use whatever medium that you can in order to ask me questions. I'll be glad to entertain them. Thank you so much for spending time with me on today. I want to make sure that we do what we can as teachers and preparing teachers in the future to make sure that we change the narrative. We want to make sure that we have positive portrayals of African American men and boys in media. Thank you very much.